What's up, Chamber One community? So Connor let me know today that we're going to be reviewing the Dagger on my battle belt.
No, no, the Palmetto State Dagger.
Oh, that makes sense.
Oh
We
my
are a gun
goodness.
channel.
All right, let's get into it. All right, so to start it off, we're going to talk about the price point of this gun real quick. So this is the Palmetto State Dagger Compact. Um, this gun, I believe, we kind of bought it in sections or in parts, if you want to say.
Yep.
So we bought the slide
Assembly.
assembly and the lower assembly. So I believe we're in this gun $250 for the gun alone. I do have some accessories on here that we'll get into. But the point of this gun was to see how good we could get a Dagger Compact for around the same price as more of a, not custom Glock, but upgraded to someone's liking Glock. So we'll run through the gun the way we've got it set up and let you guys know what we found with the gun, any issues, and kind of the pros and cons of it. So first things first, we'll talk about the sights. I actually really like the sights on this gun. It's all blacked out, metal sights. I actually really enjoyed the way they have the sight set up for the optic. So the rear sight's actually in front of your optic, which is really nice because that rear sight doesn't get in the way of you seeing your dot, which I found to really like. So very cool. They are completely blacked out, so there's no tritium or anything like that, which I kind of would have liked to have seen, especially with this being more of a carry gun size. So, but other than that, I thought that the sights were actually very high quality for such a low price.
Yeah, and I will say, so when we first bought this slide, we didn't have an optic on there for a while.
Yeah.
And so using these sights wasn't the best, just because that front sight, it was completely black, and you really do lose it. So just make sure if you buy this sight, buy this sight setup, that you make sure you go ahead and order that optic, because it's no fun shooting with a black front sight at all. So, but it does allow them to build it really cheap, and you know that you're going to put an optic on there when you buy it with that platform anyway. So very impressed with that. Just moving on. So as Connor mentioned, we bought these separate. And so what's really cool about Palmetto State is they kind of are purposely built to do a build it your own kind of style dagger, right? So with this being said, we were able to get the threaded barrel on a daily deal for about the same price that you would normally buy a standard slide. So that's why we were able to build this entire gun for $250, which is what you typically see for like the lowest base model, no threaded barrel, white dot sights and all that. Yep. So not optic cut, stuff like that. So we got this on a daily deal, but that allowed Connor to put a compensator on there. What is the brand of this compensator?
It's Harrington Arms.
Yep, which was made specifically for this, and it has very tight tolerances and no wear on the slide. Which even one of my Glock compensators, you see where it hits it a little bit and starts wearing on the slide. So far, we haven't seen that, so very impressed with that. And then, of course, it's got these cuts out on the side of the barrel on the slide, which allow you to get a really good grip on it. And, of course, it makes the slide a little bit lighter.
Yeah, and I will say having the vent cuts on there is cool. It's especially having the bronze barrel. You can see the bronze barrel through there, which is it's kind of flashy. But I honestly at first thought that having the vent cuts instead of front cocking serrations would be an issue, but it really didn't become an issue at all. The only thing I will say is if you shoot a lot, which we do, you'll burn your fingers a little bit on the barrel. Yeah. But so that's a little, something to say. Maybe it'd be better just to have cocking serrations and have that closed in, but maybe not everybody's going to put that many rounds.
Rack it a different way.
Yeah, you
if
could.
It starts getting hot.
Just use the optic or whatever you want to do. But I think that they did a good job with the design of the cuts that they did on the gun. I think it's a very aesthetically pleasing firearm. It's very good looking. The finish on it has done a pretty good job, just from in and out of holsters and bumping up at just everyday kind of use. Yeah. I will say the wear on this one is a little different than we saw with the Palmetto State Dagger Micro. I was a little disappointed in the wear on the top of that chamber, on the top of that barrel. This one is very standard to what you would see on a normal Glock. Just that very first cut in there, it's just wearing a little bit. Don't really love to see that kind of stuff because that means there's some kind of hot spot on the gun somewhere. We've talked about in other videos about our CZs having really no wear like that. So, but you are buying a $250 gun, so there's some of that to be expected.
Still better than a High Point.
Yeah, still way better than High Point. But moving on to the frame itself, this is the only part that I really had somewhat of an issue with. I don't love the way the frame is set up right here.
Yeah.
And I could go without the little finger groove thingy right here. I'm not a super huge fan. The texturing is all right. It's not anything crazy. It did a good job grabbing onto our hands. I didn't have an issue with the gun sliding around or anything. But that little kick out right here, I'm not a fan of. It seemed like it was just really hard to keep this gun pointed real far, to keep it, flat shooting. That little nub wanted to kick the front of the gun up a lot, so I'm having to drive the gun back down a lot, trying to keep it on target. So I didn't love that.
And it's not replaceable, right? It's
yeah,
not like a back strap that you can just change out.
No, it's there.
Part of the frame.
Yeah, it's all one piece. So they did a good job though on the beaver tail on the back.
Mm-hmm.
I never got Glock bite on this one. It covers up your hand real nice. So it did, and I know Joshua didn't get any, which he's the one that typically will get bit by the Glocks. But yeah, I mean, I thought they did a pretty good job.
Yeah. So overall, I mean, like he was saying, the finish on it is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I know some people have had issues with some of the pins backing out. We didn't have any issues with it. Everything, which you got to keep in mind, they're producing these in mass. They're very cheap, so you might get a lemon. So just keep that in mind. But fortunately, we got 2 of these, and both of them were perfectly fine.
Yep.
So, but I guess what should we go on through next?
If you want to go ahead and talk about the mag release, because
okay.
I know that's something we had not an issue with, but didn't really love.
Yep. So the mag release, and Connor will do a close up of that later, but it was horrible. I mean, it really was bad. It's tiny. We learned about that.
Don't be too easy on them, Joshua.
I know, but Glock learned from this, which I know this is a Gen 3 Glock clone, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
But you could have done better. I mean, it really is bad. You go to push it in, and you feel like you pushed it in all the way. Like I'm pushing it in right now, it's not falling out. You really got to dig your thumb in there. It's not the best.
Just throw it out.
It's fine. It's a Glock mag. It'll be all right.
We're testing the mags.
Durability testing, yes. So I know they make upgraded ones, which, Connor, you spent a bunch of money on this. You would think you would have already upgraded that.
I ran out. That's what happened.
Oh, you ran out of money? Okay. But yeah, that would be one of the first things I would change out is that goofy mag release. It is horrible. And it looks 3D printed. No, I'm just kidding. It doesn't.
So I agree 100%. There's no texturing on there at all.
Yeah.
It's just an unfinished piece of plastic. So there's no grooves for your finger to catch on to. And like he said, there's so much travel that you got to keep pushing. It's
stiff.
I mean, it's almost like a grit your teeth, try to, grab onto the thing to get it to drop the mag. So that could be better. It's just something to mention. But as you guys probably can notice, this is not the standard trigger that comes in here. So like I said, we were trying to see how good we could get this gun. And that's exactly what we did. We went and put a Timney trigger in it. Palmetto State had a deal on it. I believe I paid $100 for it.
That's not bad.
So it was a good deal. I put it in there. I can't remember. I think it's a 3-pound trigger. And it feels like a 3-pound trigger. So it does a really good job. I actually really like the trigger, and I know this is not a review on this is not a Palmetto State item. This is a Timney. But just saying, the trigger that was in the Palmetto State Dagger Compact originally was not a bad trigger. And if that's all you can afford is to get the gun as is, then that would be fine. Yep. The trigger worked fine for us. It's that little hinge trigger. There was a little bit of creep in it, and it was a little heavier than I would have liked, but it was a good break, clean break, and it had a really good reset. So if that's all you can afford, then it would be a good option. But like I said, we were trying to see how good we could get this gun to be, trying to use as much of just this first, the first version of it as we could.
Right.
So the trigger, I will say, when I put this trigger in with the original, I think it was the actual trigger housing in the back. And if you guys have ever changed out a trigger in a Glock, you know what I'm talking about. But the back trigger housing back here, with the Palmetto State one, this trigger was going binary. With the original Palmetto State trigger connector and the housing, it was going binary.
And why he changed it, I don't know.
So I went.
You had a free binary trigger, man.
Yeah, but yeah,
totally
at least it didn't go full auto.
Yeah.
But
That would have
So
been cool.
I looked.
Uh-oh.
Whoops. But so I looked it up, and we ended up finding that it needed the original Glock trigger housing and trigger connector. I put those in there, and the thing has been reliable ever since. Never had any issues with it. So um, I didn't investigate anymore to figure out what was going on, if something was just a little out of spec or whatever. I didn't really care because it was working. But if you are looking to do the same thing, putting a Timney in a Palmetto State Dagger compact, then you may need to go ahead and think about going ahead and getting those parts, because they're not expensive parts, but you may have the same issue. And I would hate for somebody to put that in there and all of a sudden something happened because they weren't being as safe as they should have, and the trigger went binary and they weren't expecting it. So that's just something to mention. That's what happened to me, and it may happen to you as well. So, but moving on, like I said, going back to what the original one was, the trigger in the standard Palmetto State micro, or not micro, this standard Palmetto State Dagger compact was fine. It was just as good as a Glock 19 trigger. So
exactly what you expect.
Yeah. And then I'll run through real quick the other stuff we have on here. I do have a Hollow Sun. This was the 407A3, I think, which is I think it's a Palmetto State exclusive optic. I could be wrong on that, but it's worked out real well on here. And then, like you said, the Harrington Arms comp, this comp was like $89. They do have blemish deals if you guys are looking for one. It's a really, really good value because, like he said, they actually took the dimensions and the shape of the front of the slide and they matched it perfectly, but just enough room to where you're not going to actually touch the slide, but you wouldn't know it. When you look at it, you would think that that's all one piece almost.
Yeah.
But the comp has performed excellent. I think it's done a really, really good job. The performance of the gun is just crazy how well this gun shoots. I would put it up against a lot of much higher end guns that we have. So very impressed with what you can do with I think out the door, what did I tell you? Everything included $650.
Oh, with all the upgrades,
everything.
Yeah, something like that.
So I think it's like around $650 with everything. So yeah, kind of getting into almost starting out on a Glock that's got an optic cut and all that. So
right. Go ahead and ask me the question.
What's the question I did ask you?
Would I recommend it? Duh.
I'm gonna ask you, since you already have.
Boy. Don't change it up, man.
No,
I was already preparing.
No, I'm gonna ask you, since you already have a Glock 45 with a comp, with an optic. It's a piece of junk optic, but with an optic.
On budget-friendly optic.
On your duty gun, do you think this is at least comparable, or do you think it's even better? Which one, if you're going to put it on a duty belt, would you take this over your 45?
I will say, the only thing that they would have to upgrade is that little hump.
Yeah.
And the only reason being is because I can't change it out. And it really does bother me when I shoot.
Yeah.
And so just having the Glock frame, getting rid of the Glock 45 I have, which is the Gen 5, right? Just getting rid of that hump is a big enough deal for me to go with the Glock.
Yeah.
But if they were to fix that or change it to its back strap where you can change it out, this is a much better template to build on because you're saving money and you're getting just as good reliability. I know I might offend some people by saying that, but it's off of a Glock platform. So if you're a Glock fanboy, they copied a Glock, so you should be happy about that.
Yeah.
So,
but the whole thing about the fanboys is it's got to say Glock.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh well, but it's a great template to build off of. You can do upgrades, and by the time you do most of these upgrades, you're spending about what you would spend on a Glock 19.
So I'll go back to the question you wanted me to ask you. Would you recommend this, and who are you recommending it to?
I would. Anybody who is on a budget and that wants to have a really good firearm, really good reliable firearm, or something to build. Just another thing about guns is it's a hobby, so you can build stuff, you change it up, just like the AR-15, right? That's why we had so many Bear Creek Arsenal, is we want to try different things. This allows you to try different things without going over the budget. We had never had a Timney trigger until you put it in here.
Yep.
And if you had bought a Glock 19, you probably wouldn't have put that money into the trigger because you're like, well, I got so much money in the gun.
True.
Now, I'm not going to let you ask me if I would recommend this over the Micro Dagger, because that's a whole different story.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you. I think this is pretty much the perfect option for someone who is wanting to me, this would be more of like two different types of carry. You're inside the waistband, but you
Hmm.
could also use it as a duty gun, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you
you could.
conceal carry or just put it on a belt.
When
And,
their frames are so cheap, $49 typically, you could buy the full size
yep.
frame. You know.
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is a great option for really anybody. One, somebody just wanting a little gun to go out to the range and plink with, and you don't have a ton of money in it, and you can just throw it around and do whatever you want to. Truck gun, I think it's a good truck
Yeah.
gun. This really could fit anybody's description depending on what you're wanting it for. And I will say, going back to what you were talking about, we haven't had any reliability issues with this gun other than the trigger, and we've talked about that. That was really, I don't know whose fault that was. Maybe my fault. But I did read a comment the other day that talked about. I had said the statement that I like to see a company that backs their products.
Hmm.
If there are any issues, and they said, "Well, I'd rather just have a good product." Well, I agree with you on that. It's good to have a perfect product, but there are going to be times with any company. Just understand where you're going to get a lemon.
Hmm.
It's going to have, unless you're buying, perfection, where you're spending set $5,000 to $7,000 for a hand fitted, 2011 or 1911. But there's going to be some gun that you get that's going to have issues, and you want to make sure that that gun that has issues has a company backing it that will fix the problem and get you a gun that runs correctly back to you as soon as possible. And I think that's what Palmetto State does. A lot of people have had some issues with the micro daggers, which were a newer drop for
Yeah.
them. So there's bound to be some problems that happen, and they've gotten them fixed as quick as they can. So I think Palmetto State Armory is a good company.
Hmm.
I think they're doing a good job. We talked about their founder or CEO or
Yeah.
whatever was talking about his main goal is to make guns affordable so that
To
everyone
arm
can be
citizens.
armed.
Yeah.
Right. So I like that. I love the American, feel of that, getting people
Hmm.
armed to protect themselves. So I would 100% recommend the Dagger Compact and the Micro Dagger because we have had both and we've
Yeah.
been impressed with both. So, but that's the review we've got on the Palmetto State Dagger Compact. If you guys have any questions about any of the things that you see on this gun right now, just drop us something down in the comments. If you got any suggestions for future content, let us know. Please hit that subscribe button and like and share, and we'll catch you next time.